Technology has made it difficult to sell product. People aren't buying CDs anymore. It's all streaming. If their goal is to get rich, find something else to do. If they love music and it turns them on, try and be the best that they can be, and they'll find their place.
Randy, I am so excited to sit down with you. I love your music, your arrangements. I love your playing. I love the musicians that you bring together in a way of unity, that you find the right musicians for the right song, and you allow them to just be who they are, and you produce some of the greatest music that is so inspiring. So thank you so much for joining us here.
Thank you very much. Sorry I have to go now.
I have to ask you, you're born in Chicago, okay? And when I see, pianist, arranger, composer, conductor, producer, you really have broadened your scope of who you are. But as a child, you really were into piano at an early age.
I didn't do anything else. I didn't play with other kids. I didn't play sports. To this day, I don't know the rules to baseball or football or any of that stuff. All I cared about was playing the piano because it was my security blanket. Once I discovered it.
How did you discover piano and why piano? How did that step into your life?
Just by a fluke. My uncle had given me a little toy organ when I was 3 or 4.
Yeah.
Apparently, my parents thought I was playing songs that they recognized. They said, oh, maybe we should find you a piano. They found some old piano in a church for free. It was all beat up. Brought it over to the house. And I don't remember, but they seemed to think that I sounded like I knew what I was doing. So they tried to find a teacher for me, and nobody would teach me because I was this big and my feet wouldn't reach the pedals. So I just kept playing and playing stuff I heard on the radio, and finally some teacher said, all right, I'll take them in. We won't use the pedals for a while.
Lucky for them, for sure, I'm sure. So what music were you listening to? You were young, you were maybe 5 years old, so this is
I'm not even
early
sure.
60s?
My uncle was an accordion player, and he, Hava Nagila or whatever he would play at parties, I don't even know. Just anything I heard that interests me, I would apparently copy.
Did you eventually get into music on the radio or listening to albums at the time?
Well, my parents had a very odd and limited record collection. So my earliest influences were whatever they happened to have, which was Spike Jones, a lot of Spike Jones music, and I think there was a Louis Armstrong record, odd things.
Oh, that's really, listen, Spike Jones.
Oh.
Spike Jones, you got to go back to like the beginning stage of Frank Zappa, probably.
Yeah, in the Dixieland era, he was fantastic. One of my heroes.
Absolutely. So you're listening, so did classical music or jazz step into the picture at some point?
I started playing trumpet. My grandfather gave me an old cornet. So that's when I started to learn to read music and started to listen to other players, listen to trumpet players, piano players, just started to branch out. And that kind of broadened my horizons.
So were there teachers that started teaching you out of books? What kind of learned process was it?
Most everything was by listening, until I went to school and had to learn how to read to play the trumpet. Before that, I played by ear.
Boy, how beautiful. I just had Victor Wooten here, and he spoke the same thing about how with his family, they started playing music. And as the language as we speak, you just start playing, and then later on, you kind of learn the specifics of, that sounds like you've gotten on
that's kind of what I did, and then at one point they said, we have enough trumpet players, we need a baritone horn player, so that's when I learned to read bass clef. So they said, you're playing this in school. So I played that, and at the same time I was working at a very early age on the piano. People started hiring me.
So now you're doing gigs, you're playing with different people?
Right, my first job was at the age of 12, and I walked into an organ and piano store and started playing, and they said, can we hire you to do this? Because people started gathering around. So that was my first job. And then I started playing parties and, whatever was available in Chicago to do.
How great. So were there other musicians you were getting together with at that time too?
Once I got into high school, I met some really great musicians that were a big influence. So a trumpet player named Doug Scharf, and he said, you got to see this solo. It was a Clifford Brown solo he had transcribed.
Wow.
And I went, oh my God, this is amazing. So I started transcribing Clifford Brown solos. And then I discovered Oscar Peterson driving in the car one day, and I stopped and I pulled over. I went, I'm going to go buy every record I can find. And then I started transcribing his solos.
Listen, Oscar Peterson, who was influenced by Art Tatum,
Right.
had this incredible stride,
Unbelievable. And a great feel.
Oh,
just the best feel in the world.
fantastic. And I loved the band that he had. Ed Thigpen was a dear friend of mine and a mentor of mine for many, many years, who worked with him for many, many years. So, and again, like names like Oscar Peterson, what I ask of the listeners is when they hear you mention a name like Oscar Peterson, if they don't know who he is, stop the recording right now and go research Oscar Peterson, because if that was an influence to you, and I am highly influenced by what you've done, it's important to go back and listen to who we were influenced by.
Absolutely. Since my first influence was Dixieland with Louis Armstrong and Spike Jones, the improvisation was based on very simple notes.
Yeah.
First, third, the fifth, the seventh, the ninth. Then getting into Oscar Peterson and Clifford Brown, they started playing on extensions, flatted nines, plus fives. So it was like a natural progression of, just accidentally, I sort of followed the progression of jazz just because of what I happened to start with, which was kind of a cool way of learning.
Yeah, absolutely. So were you learning the scales and
just listening and trying to learn what these players played. I'd write it down, I'd listen to it, I'd practice it, I'd learn it in different keys.
What a very natural way to learn. I wish music was taught that way.
Right.
In the systems. I think that would be a much faster way of being able to attract ourselves to music and expression in that way.
Absolutely. So many people come up to me and said, I took piano lessons as a kid, I hated it, I gave it up, and I'm so sorry I did.
Yeah.
I hear that all the time. Because they were made to play, scales and things they weren't interested in.
Have you ever thought about putting together some kind of a music educational book of some sort that speaks like that, as far as laying down that
Not
path?
really, because I don't really know what I do. Everything I call upon when I'm playing is just stuff I've heard. I don't really know what it's called or what I'm doing. I'm not thinking about it.
Boy, it's almost like you need to be studied. I'm serious. There's someone to analyze what you're doing, because what you're doing is just so, it's just so natural. And the music that I hear from you, it just feels so good.
Thank you.
What came first? Age 21, Sinatra, and then you would Streisand for 35 years. What was the next step in your evolution?
Well, the Sinatra thing was one of the most exhilarating, fun things I'd ever done.
Yeah.
For some reason, Bill Miller, who was his piano player for a long, long time, at that point, Frank decided he wanted Bill to just conduct, and he wanted to have a separate piano player. And just when he decided to do that, he was doing a tour of the Midwest. So they called a local contractor who did a lot of contracting, who happened to be my accountant and my next door neighbor, and he said, do you want to do this, audition for Frank Sinatra? I go, sure. So I told a friend of mine, because I didn't really know Sinatra's music that well at that time. He said, you need to hear this, and he gave me a stack of records, and I just listened to everything. So we went to what I thought was an audition, but it was just a rehearsal with the big band and with the orchestra. And we played a couple tunes, and Bill went over and picked up the phone. He was on the phone for a minute. He hung up. He goes, guys, that was Frank on the phone. He said, you guys sound great. That was the rehearsal. That was the audition, the rehearsal, whatever it was. So the first time I played with him, many of the tunes were just piano and vocal. I had never seen him, never rehearsed with him. It was in front of, 20,000 people.
What level of confidence do you think you were blessed with to be able to pull that off? Where'd that come from?
All I can say is because all I ever did was play the piano, and I practically didn't even speak English to people. I was like, had blinders on.
Yeah.
When I'm at the piano, I feel comfortable. And my fingers seem to always know what to do.
How beautiful.
I think it's just repetition, since started so young and did it so much every single day of my life. When I'm at the piano, everything feels okay.
How beautiful, absolutely beautiful. So Sinatra, you do the gig with Sinatra, and Bill Miller, who was a phenomenal
fantastic
gentleman and player himself, was with Sinatra for many, many years. For him to have the confidence in you at 21, really, that says a lot.
He probably looked at me and was worried. But there was some difficult stuff, and everything seemed to be fine. After the first show, Frank leaned over to the guitar player, Irv Cotler. Alviola.
Alviola was the guitar player. Irv Cotler was his drummer.
Yes,
Yeah.
And he said something to him, and then he went back up. He said, ladies and gentlemen, that was Randy Waldman on the piano. And from that night on, he introduced me every night. So he seemed to be okay with it. So.
Doesn't get any bigger than the chairman of the board, that's
Right.
for sure. Old Blue Eyes laid down a foundation that really is
Nobody
beautiful.
like him, yeah.
Yeah, really incredible. So where from there now? So now you did this tour with them at that point?
I did the tour in the Midwest. He wasn't a musical mentor, but he was sort of a life business mentor. He took me aside. It was a trombone player in Chicago named Bill Porter. He said, I got to tell you something. He goes, you're a big fish in a little pond. You need to get out of Chicago. I said, what do you mean? This is where I live. He goes, you need to go to New York or Los Angeles. There's a lot more stuff going on and a lot more opportunities. I went, okay. So I went home. I told my parents what he said. And they go, well, you can't leave. I said, well, he said I should go.
How old are you at this time when you made the move?
I was 21.
Okay.
I was doing a local gig as a house pianist at a place in Chicago, and all these different acts would come in. And one of the acts was a group called the Letterman.
Yeah.
I got friendly with their guitar player. He called me, he said, we're going on tour, you want to tour with us? I go, yeah. We toured from Chicago to LA. As soon as I got there, I saw palm trees, and I said, I quit. And I stayed, and that was it.
About what year was that?
75 or 6.
Yeah.
Something like that. And my parents boxed up my belongings. Somebody drove out my car, and I never went back.
So you're here in LA. What was the first thing you started to hook up with in LA?
Well, I didn't really know anybody except Bill Miller.
Yeah.
So I started looking at the back of records, looking at the piano players, and I started calling people.
Oh, that is incredible.
And I don't even know how it happened, but somehow I got called to play a concert with Henry Mancini at the Hollywood Bowl. And that was great. They didn't tell me it was a white tux, not a black tux, which I found out like a half an hour before the show. So I got a white tuxedo off of a mannequin, and the sleeves came to here. They were all rolled up with paper clips. That was one of my first gigs. So that was a great opportunity. Then I did some recordings with Henry Mancini, which were a lot of fun.
Beautiful. You know, when you say you looked on the back of the albums and looked for names of piano players, an advantage that we had in our youth, that the information that was on the back of these albums, you know, telling about the music, the musicians that were there, there was some great information that was there that was very helpful.
Absolutely. Anytime I heard a great solo or a great drummer or a great bass player, I want to know who's playing.
Yeah.
That's how you learn, and we don't have that anymore.
So when did Streisand come into the picture?
It's kind of funny because I started getting busy doing studio sessions, and that came about in a very strange way. I started doing some concerts with a singer named Minnie Riperton.
Great singer who had a range.
Oh yeah.
That was it 5 octaves?
4 or 5 octaves.
4 or 5, yeah,
crazy.
incredible.
So I started working with her. We started opening the shows for George Benson. George heard me and hired me. Minnie was not pleased. We went and toured Japan. This is a long story getting back to your answer, but we toured Japan just as the first digital synthesizer had been released, the Yamaha DX7.
Yeah.
We were in Japan just as it came out. We were able to buy some and bring it back. So when I got back to LA, nobody knew who I was, but everyone heard that I had a DX7. So I started getting hired.
Oh my gosh.
And I'd bring this thing and I'd play, and they go, well, can you play the piano too? I go, yeah. And it just kind of snowballed, and I started doing more and more sessions.
So at that time, many musicians, started to understand the session scene out here really started to kind of catch on, and there was a lot of work going on. So you were doing mostly sessions, or were there certain touring dates you were doing? Were you balancing them both?
At that point, I was still touring with George Benson and getting busier and busier doing sessions. And I'd been playing with George on and off for about 5 or 6 years, and it got to the point where I was getting too busy to go on the road. So every time I'd tell George, I go, George, I think I need to stay in LA. He kept giving me a raise instead of letting me quit. I go, no, I don't want more money. I really need to stay in LA. So this went on a couple of years, and finally I said, I have to stay in LA.
Yeah.
Because I was just doing a lot of great projects and a lot of fun things.
And at that time, what was happening?
Movies and records and TV shows and jingles, and that gets back to your original question, how did I start with Streisand?
Yeah.
Because I just happened to be doing so much work, and a lot of contractors were calling me. Streisand was one of the sessions that I did. And at that time, I had just purchased the first sampling keyboard, the emulator.
Right.
So when I'm on the session, I was showing the songwriters, Alan and Marilyn Bergman, this emulator.
Brilliant writers.
Great writers.
Yeah.
Well, they said to Barbara, come over, you got to see what this thing can do. And I played for her. The next record she did, I got a call. And the next record I did, I got a call. And somehow, I'm not quite sure, but everyone assumed that I was her piano player. Fine with me.
And then you got involved with conducting for also, right?
Right. So it's been a long time, and I started working on her records. And then she had some movie soundtracks, and I worked on her movies. Then in 1994, she decided to come out of retirement after 20 years or 18 years.
Yeah.
So I did that first tour, and then I've done every tour after that. Marvin Hamlish was her conductor.
Yeah.
And eventually, I became her music director. Bill Ross took over after Marvin Hamlish passed away, and then they scaled down the orchestra, and so for the last 5-6 years, I've also conducted with one hand and played with the other.
You know, it's interesting for this next generation to hear about all that you were doing. When you speak about jingles and TV and movies, and then Streisand, and then doing different dates, and now you're figuring out, synthesizer stuff, as new stuff was coming out, and that was a time where new stuff was coming out, really
Very exciting.
very different stuff too.
Yes, yes.
You know, business-wise, how did you balance all this? How did you schedule yourself? How did you keep track of money and finances? How did you do all this?
I had a little book, and if they said we need you at MGM at 10, you write in 10. If they say we need you at 20th Century Fox at 2, you write in 2, and I just kept it all in a ledger and just said yes to everything.
Do you still have that ledger?
I have every one since, yes.
Do you realize that there's a book inside of you that can go through that ledger and start to tell some stories? And much like an educational tool to let this next generation know of what it was like and how you scheduled yourself and just what you went through and what you developed. This would be really interesting.
I never thought about it.
This would be really interesting.
It's fun to look back at those, to see all the people that were around back then and all the people I got to work with.
Yeah, and the stories are great. Steve Lukather wrote a book, that's called "The Gospel According to Luke," and he kind of went through his dates and found out and told stories. It was very, very helpful for people to see and learn. This would be absolutely fantastic.
That would be fun.
You're with Streisand, you get involved with working on soundtracks. When I look at this here, Ghostbusters, Romanced in the Stone, Back to the Future, Beetlejuice, Who Framed Roger Rabbit, Mission Impossible, The Bodyguard, Titanic. You're in the session and you're reading the music and you are actively involved in playing. Were you doing any arranging for it?
Nope, strictly as a player.
Just strictly as a player.
You walk in, there's 60, 80, 90-piece orchestra.
Yeah.
You've never seen the music before. You sit down, you scan through it to see if there's anything, that you need to look at.
Yeah.
Boom.
And they start.
It just goes. Yeah.
Did anything ever challenge you? Was there ever, a movie score or something that really started to challenge you that you found you had to kind of hide and work out?
The first thing most piano players do is start looking through the stack of music.
Right.
So if there's something that looks really challenging, I'll set it aside and I'll be practicing it in my head until we get to it. Just going, I'll maybe do this, maybe use this, switch hands or do this.
Yeah.
So by the time we get to it, I've played it numerous times in my head.
What a
you don't have a choice.
Well, what a process. Listen,
Yeah.
And maybe fear is a good motivator too.
Well,
right?
there's some of that, yeah.
Yeah, you throw a little bit of that in there too. When
Definitely.
It turns it around.
Yeah, because it costs too much money for a full orchestra. Every minute costs whatever it costs,
Yeah.
$1,000 a minute. You have to be perfect.
Yeah.
So you don't want to be the one to make a mistake.
And who were some of the musicians that you were meeting at this time? Were there other musicians that now you're networking, you're meeting everyone?
All the great studio players of our time. I just worked with everybody and anybody. After a while, you get to see all the same faces, and you go to the next session. Oh, you were just at that session, and but a lot of just the industry greats that are mostly behind the scenes people that the general public never knows, but they were, amazing artists.
And certain names that I think this next generation, may not know or understand, like even Henry Mancini. What a brilliant musician and writer himself and what he did.
He wrote incredible melodies, and he had a combination of real simple stuff, but were real great voicings and sort of a jazz influence. He was very unique, wrote great stuff.
How amazing. Some of the artists that I have here that you've worked with, and which is really an incredible wide variety. Michael Jackson, Paul McCartney, Patti LaBelle, Celine Dion, Beyonce, Madonna, Whitney Houston, Olivia Newton-John, Barry Manilow, Ray Charles, Michael Buble, Quincy Jones, Johnny Mathis, Stevie Wonder, Andrea Bocelli. This is an amazing versatility. What in your life have you listened to or been influenced to allow yourself to walk in and have that level of versatility?
I have no idea.
It's incredible.
I always want to sound authentic. So if it's a rock session or a pop session or a jazz session, you're just always listening to what everybody else is playing, and you're trying to find your space to play what's appropriate. And I guess it worked or fooled everybody all these years, because it's just really fun to sound authentic in whatever style of music that you're playing.
Well, I think nobody's been fooled. If anything, everyone's been highly inspired from your playing at many, many different levels.
Thank you.
Your first solo album was Wigged Out with John Petitucci and Vinnie Colaiuta.
Right.
Tell me about that. How'd that come about? Did you want to all of a sudden put your own thing together?
People had been asking me to do it for years, and I was just so busy in the studios that it just wasn't something I was thinking about.
Yeah.
But I thought, the more I thought about it, the more it would be fun just to come up with really challenging arrangements that interest me, that I would like to listen to,
Yeah.
but written specifically for specific players.
Yeah.
You know, nobody can do what Vinnie can do, and the way John Petitucci played,
Yeah.
I wrote it for them specifically.
This is what I'm so impressed with you, Randy, because you do this with all of your albums. You bring these players in and you just really allow their individuality to be featured in how you give them freedom within the structure of what you've laid out. This is great, psychology in what you're doing at a high level.
It's fun for me to listen to, so I would just hope that it's fun for everyone else to listen to. Yeah. To feature a great bass solo, or some odd time signature. There's a tune where Vinnie's playing a 4/4 march underneath a 7/8 song.
Yeah.
And then it matches up every other bar.
Yeah, yeah.
And it just cracks me up.
Out of the mind of Vinnie, for sure. That's for sure. What motivates you?
I love music. It's fun to play. So just playing great music is very rewarding. Food motivates me too. I like to eat.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Do you cook?
I do cook.
Fantastic.
I like to bake too, yeah.
Oh, that's very nice. The Unreal album. Okay, when I had first gotten that, and I heard Hawaii 5-0 and the Jetsons, the first thing I did was I started to laugh. Randy, I started laughing hysterically. This music is on, and I'm laughing through the entire piece. And I found myself, it's the first time I ever laughed out of joy, because I could relate to the music of being a child and hearing the Jetsons. And then when I heard, just what your view of where you wanted to go with this, and what you did with it was just so fantastic.
Oh, thank you so much.
Really?
I'm kind of a fidgety person, so I want to be challenged all the time.
Yeah.
So complicated, kind of interesting stuff makes me laugh.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the angle that I went for.
With all these great musicians that you've worked with, and I know in the Super Heroes, from a drummer standpoint, you had Vinnie and Steve together.
Yeah.
Vinnie Colaiuta and Steve Gadd.
That was unbelievable.
Just tell me about what that was like.
You've never seen a love fest like that before.
Yeah.
Vinnie has so much respect for Steve, and Steve, Vinnie, they were beaming, and I wasn't sure if it was going to work sound-wise, because I wanted them in the same room, facing each other, and I didn't know if the drums were going to leak too much into each other's mics.
Yeah.
It worked out great, and they just put, a little bit of a barrier between the two.
Yeah.
And they watched each other, and when Steve would do one thing, Vinnie would say, "Oh, fill in and do something on the brushes," when Steve would do something on the sticks, and they just loved working with each other. It was really a lot of fun to be a part of that.
It was beautiful that you even thought of the fact of doing that, to bring these two masters together from different eras, and it really was kind of interesting to see.
Right.
Listen, it took someone like yourself to allow that level of respect to even be featured, and for that level of artistic expression to even be produced. I mean, it really was.
How often could that happen?
It doesn't happen often, and you pulled it off. That's why I'm saying.
It took forever, by the way.
Yeah.
Because Steve doesn't live in LA.
Yeah.
And both those guys are on tour all the time.
Yeah.
So, I don't know, I waited almost, a year to make that day happen.
Yeah.
But all the stars aligned, and it worked out great.
How beautiful.
Yeah.
Now, listen, the Spider-Man theme, Super Heroes won the Grammy Award for Best Arrangement, Instrumental, and Vocals. Well, congratulations, because it really is amazing how you think. And you say you're fidgety. All those are great qualities, because that fidgetiness has produced incredible music.
I'll tell my mother you said that.
please do. The Super Heroes album, you had some players on here that were just, appearances with Chick Corea. What was it like with Chick?
Well, getting the artist that I wanted was a challenge, because I really wanted this record to be special, and I wanted my favorite players. Because it was called Super Heroes, I wanted my music superheroes.
Beautiful.
So once I decided that was like, oh my God, this thing's going to take forever. But I just thought, well, If it takes forever, that's how long it takes. Every artist that lent their talents to the project came about in a different way. Some I knew, some I called, some I emailed, some I didn't know at all, some I bumped into backstage. In the case of Chick Corea, Carlitos Del Puerto was playing bass. He tours with Chick, and he goes, "Oh, I think Chick would love playing on this one song." I go, "Really?" And he played it for him. Within, I would say, 3 or 4 days of Chick saying yes, it was done. Whereas Wynton Marsalis, who I bumped into at Bill Clinton's birthday party, and I was playing 3 songs with Barbra Streisand. We were backstage, and I told him about the project. I thought, well, he's not going to want anything to do with it. I said, would you mind playing a solo? He goes, sure. From that sure, it was 5 months maybe before I finally was able to coordinate getting him in one place in a studio. But it happened.
It happened.
Yeah.
And what was it like with Wynton in that scene?
Well, it was very funny because he said he would do it. All my communications were between his manager, his handlers, coordinators. So when it was finally scheduled, I was in LA. I rented a studio in New York. They said, this is a studio that Wynton likes to work at. We picked a time. It was like 1 o'clock in the afternoon. I waited till about 1:15. I figured I'd wait for him to get in, get settled, and I'd call him on the phone and we'd talk about the part. I called him up. They said Wynton was here. He played a great solo. He left. I've yet to be able to thank him in person.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, and he played beautiful,
the
beautiful
solo.
song.
It's absolutely incredible. You know, you mentioned Carlitos. I'm going to interview him tomorrow at some point. So I'm going to have many of his stories. You have over here Eddie Daniels. Mm-hmm. What a great player.
Oh, great player, great guy, funny guy. I talked to him. He said, I'd love to play on it. I played him, sent him the song. He called me up. He goes, do you have any more songs I can play on? You know, because I kind of think of him, you know, as a clarinet virtuoso.
Yeah, yeah.
He goes, how about something on the sax? So I sent him another song, and he played a great tenor sax solo. And we just talked back and forth on the phone, and I sent him the tracks and told him what my ideas were. And
yeah.
That's how, you know, some people, if they're not in LA, we kind of just did it.
And Eddie, who I'd love to sit down and interview also, because I used to go hear Eddie many years ago at the Village Vanguard with the Thad Jones Mel Lewis Band.
Wow, yeah.
And every Monday night they'd be playing, and I'd go sit front row and hear Eddie play.
I bet that was amazing.
The entire band was incredible.
Oh, I bet that was
and
great.
Just, you know, Randy Brecker.
Randy, I didn't know that well, but Michael had played on my previous record, and I called Randy and told him about the project, and he said, sure, I'd be happy to play on it. It was that easy.
Michael Buble.
Michael Buble, I worked on his first record before anyone had any idea who he was.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah. Producer David Foster had heard him at a wedding. And he said, I'm going to do a record with this kid, Michael. And they brought in a bunch of charts. Michael's Canadian.
Yeah.
Paul Anka's Canadian. And Paul Anka had Sinatra's charts. So he lent the arrangements for a lot of the songs on the first record. So Paul was there and Michael was there. He was very young, and we did the record, and then we went around and started doing promotional fundraisers and concerts just to get people to know who Michael was. And of course, he exploded after that.
So David Foster hears him at a wedding.
Yes. Yeah.
That's a whole other story.
I know, it's crazy.
How fantastic. You know, it's amazing in this industry how, and you know, these names that you talk about, you know, Josh Groban, I mean, you know, Jeff Goldblum, Olivia Newton-John, John Travolta. These are people that are so talented at what they do. But you brought them all together. This album is absolutely just this wonderful journey of just personalities that you brought together.
It was a fun challenge. The actors, like John Travolta and Jeff Goldblum, the intro to the original Superman show, where the guy goes, oh, look, up in the sky, it's a bird, it's a plane, it's Superman. I thought, wouldn't it be cool to have different people do those voices?
Yeah.
I was doing a show in Washington, a Tony Bennett tribute, and Michael Bublé and Josh Groban were on the show. I told them about my idea. They go, yeah, we'd like to say one of those lines. So we went into a dressing room, held up my iPhone, they each said a line. And I thought, well, this is just the beginning. I had produced a Christmas record for John Travolta and Olivia Newton-John, sent John Travolta a text, would you mind doing a line? I didn't hear back from him for 3 days. I thought, I'm not going to bother him. Then I get a text, he goes, how do you want it read? Do you want it upbeat? Do you want it loud? Do you want it excited? And he sent me a whole choice of him saying this one line.
Oh my gosh.
Everyone happened kind of by accident. I sent Olivia Newton-John a text, would you do this? She goes, sure. She sent it to me. I was doing a big orchestra session with Barbra Streisand, and her husband is James Brolin, the great actor.
Yes.
I told him about it. He goes, I'll do it. He goes, I didn't know I was going to get a gig today. Barbra was singing, listening back to a song we had just recorded. We stepped into the vocal booth where Barbra was singing. I held up my phone, and James just talked right into my phone. So that's how that all came about.
Isn't it amazing how technology today, from when we were younger to what we have now, that you can hold this phone up and just have that quality
It's
of
unbelievable.
digital clarity that you can now put on a recording and
It's unbelievable.
tweak and edit. It really is amazing.
Yeah. The only limit is your imagination at this point.
Boy, you go back to that first keyboard from Yamaha that you got in Japan, and you think about what we have now. Are there any new gear that you see now that's exciting to work with?
There's 3 different basic types of keyboards. The old analog,
Yeah.
the digital, like the DX7,
Yeah.
and the samplers, which record sounds and put them in.
Right.
So we're just getting more and more versions of sort of hybrids of all those together.
Right.
So when you play a keyboard now, the attack might be a sample, the rest might be FM digitized synthesis.
Yeah.
So it's, we're just getting all these great minds figuring out how can we make this stuff even better.
Does technology inspire you?
I love technology. Yeah.
You welcomed it, right?
I think it's really cool.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing to see what we have now.
I'm interested in gadgets and dials, and I became a helicopter instructor and an airplane instructor, mostly because I wanted to know how all this stuff worked.
Yeah. The motivation that you have, which is so amazing, that you are so into what you're doing, and you seem to be an extremely aware person, and you also seem to be a person that really kind of lives in the moment, in the now, which is an extremely great quality, and which is just fantastic.
It's good and bad. You kind of walk around, bumping into walls because you don't know what's coming or going. But I think you're probably right. I'm always trying to find something that excites me, and I'm thinking about that.
Yeah. We have this generation here. If you could give a list of names that you think younger generation of both piano players and arrangers and people that you think would be worth for them to research, who would you say?
Depending on what kind of music that they like, but my background is mostly jazz.
Yeah.
Nat King Cole, piano player as well as a singer.
Singer, yeah.
Great piano player. Teddy Wilson, Art Tatum, Oscar Peterson, as I said, Clifford Brown,
Yeah.
Michael Brecker, Herbie Hancock, Chick Corea. Louis Armstrong is one of the all-time greats.
Yeah.
The Beatles. There's so many really, really special, unique players that brought something that nobody else did before them.
Yeah. We have these young musicians that are inspired to hear these interviews, and they have tons of great comments on it. In closing, what would you say to this next generation in preparation for, if they want to be involved with music, if they want to play piano, if they want to arrange or produce, what would you say to that next generation?
The technology has made it difficult to sell product because people aren't buying CDs anymore. They're not really buying that many records anymore. It's all streaming. If their goal is to get rich, find something else to do.
Yeah, yeah.
If they love music and it turns them on, try and be the best that they can be, and they'll find their place. Because it's so enjoyable to play music, and it's so enjoyable to play with other great musicians and come together and make this very cool sound. You go, how is that possible? Just try and be as good as you can possibly be, Learn everywhere you can learn. If somebody sounds terrible, go, I've learned not to play like that guy. Or if somebody plays something you like, find out what it is.
Yeah.
Write it down, learn it in all the keys, see where it fits.
Beautiful. Well, the enthusiasm, the passion, the humility, and just the sheer energy that you have in your music is so inspiring. You bring joy to many, many people, Randy, and for that, I thank you so much.
Oh, thank you very,
Thank
very
you.
much. Really appreciate it.
Dom Famularo here at the Sessions panel. This is so exciting. Thanks for watching. Thanks for subscribing. Click the subscribe button to be a part of what we're doing. The views help us tremendously. All of your comments, we read them and react to them. This is incredible. The support you're giving us is great. The Sessions panel, we'll see you real soon.